Welcome back, guys. So, here we go. Power Rankings Part 2. As a summary, we're going into last time. Boston was at 20 at the Uprising. At 19, we had Los Angeles Valiant. 18, we were looking at the London Spitfire. And then, that's really weird to say, to have them not in the top tier. And then for 17, we had Paris Eternal. So, that was the bottom four. Now we're going to be moving on 16 through 13. So, a team that people might have a little bit lower than this, especially after the last couple of years, we got Houston. I believe they actually finished 16 last year. So, the Outlaws, they had an interesting offseason. Big departures, we talk about mostly Jake. Jake retired. He is now going to be casting for this season, and it's a bit of a loss, but not really for this team because they have a ton of DPS. You talk about they're retaining Dante and Linkser, two very good players from season two, and in terms of Linkser, season one and two, and then they also signed two new guys in the form of Blase and Hydration. Particularly Hydration, very good DPS player. Um, he was on Los Angeles Gladiators the first two seasons, but that's four DPS players, and while they're loaded in that position, you can only rotate two of them in at a time. So it's going to be a little bit of a trick. Hydration and Blase both played a decent amount of tank last season. I don't really envision that happening again with the 2-2-2 lock. So it's a thing of there's a chokehold, and there's a couple of other teams that are like this, particularly like right off the bat. I think of New York. New York had this issue the last couple of years, where you have too much. It's almost like too much of a good thing. Um, and it's fine if you have four really good DPS players, but it's not fine if your tank line or your support line suffers, and they're not equal to these players. So for tanks, they retain Muma, Spree, and then the big pickup was Meko, formerly of the NYXL. So I assume we're going to be seeing a lot of Muma and Meko as the tank duo. That's a solid duo. It kind of depends on meta for me with Muma. I think Muma's a very good Winston player, but his Reinhardt leaves a lot to be desired for me. Um, and then we'll see about any like Sigma or Orisa. I don't foresee a ton of Orisa play, but we'll see. Maybe Double Shield is still alive. Who really knows at this point? They've nerfed it about 17 times. So again, that's a decent tank line. Both good players, but is a little bit of a we could see a language issue, perhaps. Um, this was a team of all English speaking players for the last couple of seasons. Now bringing in guys like Meko. They've also brought in Jexy from the formerly of the Seoul Dynasty, and then you have Repel from the Vancouver Titans. So do I? The reason I have them at 16, I don't love the support line. You look at Ruckus and Boink, they were decent last season, but not top 10 by any means. Jexy got benched, and then Repel was sitting behind Twilight essentially the whole season. So, are they significant upgrades over these two? In my opinion, no. Probably slight upgrades, but unless we see an Anameta, Ruckus is below average. And then, like I said, Repel, we don't know. He might pop off. I remember that he was not very good when they subbed him in for Twilight. He's a clear downgrade. So that's probably the weak point of this team for me, the support line. And they seem disconnected. I remember in season two, it was all about the team cohesion, your communication, your chemistry, because it was goats for so long, and the Outlaws were not very together. They got blown up a lot. We saw Muma die all the time because they didn't coordinate their health packs from their brig, and they just had a lot of issues. It seemed like communication wise, and you shouldn't see that from a team. They all speak the same language. These core of guys have been playing together for years, and it never really coalesced. They do have a new coach coming in from the Titans, so maybe that will help, but like I said, in terms of talent, I think too much of it is locked into that DPS, those two DPS slots, and they don't have enough depth in their other positions to really excel and push for the playoffs. So after Houston at 16, we go to 15, and higher than they've ever been in one of my rankings, we got new look Florida. So the Mayhem, they made some good moves over the offseason. I still don't love this team. I think they could make a playoff push when you talk about guys like BQB, Saya Player. Gargoyle played really well when he filled in, and this team they looked solid in stages 3 and 4. Just like the Washington Justice, they won some matches. They looked like they could be a legitimate team that could push for playoffs. It's just they had a horrible start to the year, so they were already far and away out of it. But I don't like them as much as a team like Washington. Like I said, Fate, Saya Player, Gargoyle, really, really solid. I thought Chris did a nice job last season. When you talk about Byram, I think he could make a good impact as well. In terms of the DPS, we're gonna see. BQB for me was a bit of a disappointment last year. He was supposed to be this incredible Sombra player coming in, and it just didn't really ever work out like that. Kind of underperformed in most of the roles he was in, whether it was Zarya or, like I said, that Sombra towards the latter half of the season. So we'll see. I've heard some good things about Yaki. If he comes in and plays really well, I think that they could have a pretty formidable team. But with Florida for me, it's just depth, and I haven't seen the results from them to put them over a lot of the teams that are going to be coming up next. So this is a team I feel pretty good about Florida. I think they'll have their best year as a Overwatch League team. Their new colors look great, a huge upgrade over the McDonald's style from before. But like I said, they haven't had the success yet, so I'm gonna keep them at 15 for now. Moving on to number 14, it's the Dallas Fuel. So, after an extremely, extremely disappointing season one and a pretty disappointing season two, where they played well for the start and then just kind of fell apart, we got the Dallas Fuel. So, they have most of their core from season two. They did make a couple of big changes though. They traded RCK mid-season for Note, who they've retained. Guys like Taimu is now back into contenders, so he will not be playing. As you can see, not even on the roster. Um, and then they traded over to the Gladiators OGE, who is their main tank. They then acquired Gamsu, formerly of Boston in season one, and then Shanghai in season two. So they've reunited the Gamsu Note duo from Boston. Solid tank line. Is it better than OGE Note or even like Trill, who was still on the team? I don't envision him seeing much playtime. He's their other main tank player. Um, their tank line, it's decent. If this was season one, I would say it's top 10, pushing top 5. But I think at this point, Gamsu and Note, they're solid players. They're good for your team. They're not going to cause issues. They're going to be great teammates to the others. And Gamsu in particular is a very good in-game leader, keep everyone level-headed. But in terms of talent, I think they're pretty low on the list. Note's hero pool has been questioned. Besides the D.Va, he's not been very effective on some of the other roles. I would say it's a similar thing with Gamsu. His Reinhardt wasn't super impressive to me last season, but his Winston is very, very solid. You look at their backline, pretty much the same. They didn't add anyone. You still got Closer and Unko as your starters, and then you also have Harry Hook, who has been a backup to mostly Closer, but Harry Hook's he's been a Swiss Army knife in his Overwatch career. He's done a whole lot of different roles, DPS, and then both roles for the support, whether it's like Zen or Lucio. So he's another good guy to have on your team. This team should be very comfortable with each other. The big additions: Doha, very talented DPS player from contenders in Korea, and then they grabbed Decay, the phenom that was a first year last year. played on the Los Angeles Gladiators. He had some really strong moments, some great performances, also had some struggles at times. The hero pool wasn't as big as a lot of people were hoping that it would be, so had a little bit of a disappointing season, but you could say the same thing about a guy like Sinatra in season one. Super hyped up, just turned 18. He actually turned it in the middle of the season. Was decently underwhelming season one, and then of course season two he was the Overwatch League MVP. So Decay, like I said, huge talent. Doha and Decay on DPS, that is scary if they're both playing well. So that is definite points for them. Will we see Zachary though? I thought the worst player on the team last year by a decent margin. Um, I just I'm sorry, having him in the same like conversation as Decay and Doha is just kind of silly to me. He just doesn't have the skill that they have in the game. And then you also have AKM, who maybe he could get some playtime here and there. I think it's probably likely that he'll see a lot of time on the bench, and this might be his last year, unless maybe they send him somewhere else. And he gets a chance. Maybe a team like Paris would be good. Reunite him with Soon, but I just don't see if it's me and I'm the coach, unless something crazy is happening in terms of like attitude or an injury or something like that. I'm just gonna play Decay and Doha. I'm gonna roll with them because they are incredibly talented. But again, the coaching staff hasn't been great the last couple of years. I don't trust them a whole lot. Their back line is decent, especially Unko. He's one of the underrated supports of the league. But this is a middle of the pack team for me. I just don't see them coming together and really scaring teams. Even though I think that their talent is probably the best of their 3 years, to be perfectly honest. But like I said, they don't have the history, kind of like the Mayhem. I'm not comfortable putting them any higher than number 14. So one more for this video. We got number 13. It is our good friends, the Pandas. We're looking at Chengdu Hunters. So, one of the darlings of last season, they did make the play-ins at number 12. A lot of people had them at 18 to 20 in their initial rankings. I know I personally had them at 19, so they were a lot better than expected. They're mostly looking at a similar team from last year. A couple of the ones that don't have the pictures are the pickups for this year. I don't see them breaking into the lineup too much. I think we're going to see mostly what we saw last year, at least at the start. When you look at guys like Jinmu and Bacon Jack, I assume that'll be their starting duo for DPS. Elsa and Ameng will most likely be the tank line. Although it's very possible we could see some Late Young because he played a decent amount last year. And then they have Kyo and Yveltal coming in at the supports. They did add 2 supports, so it'll be interesting to see that dynamic. Personally, I don't have a lot of knowledge on Mali or Lingsa, so they're a bit of a wild card for me. But the Hunters were kind of a team for me that took everybody by surprise. They were able to pull off some big upsets, but in the 2-2-2, I think that a lot of that novelty, you could almost say, is going to wear off. I don't think they'll be as strong as they were, in particular, like in certain metas. And if the meta predictions are correct, I don't see them having a ton of success. I don't see super strong Winston or Reinhardt players in. So again, I think this is a middle of the road team. They have some great talent on it. You want to talk about Jinmu, Ameng, Bacon Jack, Kyo had some great moments last year. I thought Elsa was one of the more solid off tanks that people didn't really talk about last year, and Late Young had some solid moments on the Diva as well. So I got them right outside the playoffs. Solid team. I just don't like them as much as a couple of the ones that are coming up. So, end of part 2. We have now gone through 8 of the teams. From here on out, we're looking at teams that they're going to get into that play-ins in terms of like how I like them. again, don't think this is how the final standings will shake out, but going into the year, um, we got the upper tier. We're starting to get to the cutoff. I marked a couple of lines in my on my sheet or my board when I was working on it, and we're getting to another tier of teams that I think could potentially make deep playoff runs at this point. So, thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think about the rankings themselves. If you have any big agreements or disagreements, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.